Adam, I can see you're busy, but can you please tell me about this upcoming ban on fluorescent technology?
Yeah, well, actually the ban has already come into play. It's a European ban, so it's not something that we've imposed ourselves, and it affects all light booth manufacturers who are making a fluorescent or halogen light booth. And it's all down to the mercury content in the actual lamp itself. So that's the hazardous part of it. And that's why the EU and many other regions have put that ban in place, really, to get rid of these hazardous substances out of our day-to-day environment. Throughout Europe, the UK, and many parts of the world, and that is only escalating further, the ban on fluorescent technology means that they will no longer be able to supply a fluorescent light booth into those regions. Though, if you have got a fluorescent light booth, we can still supply you with the fluorescent light bulbs whilst we do the transition or change, but that's only limited stock, so we're unable to have any more made, we're unable to get any more in stock with what we've got, and we've put a stock in place to try and help with that transition time. And obviously with fluorescent technology, it's no longer relevant as well. So even though it's still in the light booths and the current fluorescent ones, your environments where you're going to have the store lighting, they're all LED already. So for anyone doing colour assessments, colour matching, they should really be using LED technology to get the accurate matches on there. But if we go over to the UltraView, I'll talk you through a little bit more.
Yeah, sounds good.
So as we've previously discussed, that the traditional CAC cabinet's been around for 60 years. This is now taking that forward due to the ban that we've discussed already. The CAC is limited in the amount of light sources that it can have, and that's the same with most fluorescent and halogen light booths. With UltraView, you can have multiple light sources on it within the actual unit itself. But energy efficient wise, it's a much better booth. So traditionally with the CAC cabinet, you'd probably be looking at around 300 to 500 watts, depending on the type of booth you've got. UltraView technology, even if you're running everything at its maximum, is only 80 watts. So from an energy perspective for brands and retailers throughout multiple industries, it's a much more energy efficient system to actually be able to use. It's an all metal construction now as well, and it's available in the two colours of the N7 and the N5. All of the head units are based on the N7, but the interior can be changed to those accordingly. The tilting table is an optional extra within the system, and that also has the powder coat finish to match the base of the unit, to add to the environment when you're viewing. With fluorescent technology and halogen technology, it's very directional. So in the middle of the light booth, within that sort of A4 space, is the ideal viewing area. But on an UltraView, it's more even across the whole base of the unit. So you could be colour matching your products, laying out a full garment, laying out a large plastic part, and that would be fully covered within the booth itself. So illumination wise, it's a lot better than the traditional technologies that are available. And also going forwards, it will be the only technology that will be relevant to the industry. Light sources wise, you've still got your key light sources such as your daylight and the illuminate A, the IE standard, UV, but then there's multiple points of sales that are now available. A lot of people would say, you know, does it have TL84 or cool white fluorescent in there? Well, because they are fluorescent, triphosphor and halophosphor light sources, you can't really replicate those with LEDs. And a lot of the lighting that's within the store environments now is very different. So what we found working with multiple brands throughout Europe, America and the UK is that the light sources that are using, they've moved to LED within stores, but their colour approvals process is still using fluorescent technology. So when the product gets in store, it can look very different to how the original design concept has been put forward through the brand, which can then lead to a decrease in sales or performance issues within the product itself. Daylight wise, with fluorescent technology, you're a BC rated daylight to the CIE standard, and with halogen technologies, it's usually an AB rated and drifts over time. But with the tunable technology, and I must say that with that, and emphasising the point on tunable, is we've moved away from any fixed light sources because they deteriorate over time. Even LEDs do. But with tunable, we can adjust it back to its original calibration point. So to touch on the calibration point of the actual unit, every system is calibrated in the factory to one database. So when you then put out the systems across your global supply chain, you'll have greater consistency with the booths that you've got, and eliminating any discrepancies through lamp sort of depreciation over time and sort of the reduction in light sources that are in there. You don't have to change out any light sources anymore. But what is important is a yearly calibration on the system to bring it back to that original database to insist that your global supply chain is consistent, and the only variable really is the ambient and the viewer's eyes when they're actually viewing the product inside the unit, and not the actual booth itself. So it's a lot more stable. But the D65 light source is A-rated, and it's a solid A-rated D65 to the CIE standard. It's best in class. We also have that on the D50 light source as well. So you can see on here on a standard switch set, we've got the 2 daylight light sources starting first. And then we have these different L illuments. And these are more typical of the point of sale that would be in a store environment. And it's what all brands should be looking to move towards. And that's not just on a particular industry sector, that's right across multiple sectors, from food to textiles, plastics, paints and coatings. So it's important that they are assessing under the right light sources. So just to flick through a couple of the light sources in here, the L40, colour temperature wise, is a 4000 Kelvin, so it's close to the TL84, and realistically, if somebody's looking for something to mirror that as a standard from the TL84, they should probably look to the L40 as a solution going forward. Whereas brands have specified TL84 as a standard, actually what's in their store lighting is more important. So to be able to find that out and communicate that back with VeriVide, we can then put that light source into our database and program that into the Lightbooth and roll that over the global supply chains. So you can see here there's an L31 light source. That's actually been adopted by in stores by H&M, Burberry for instance, whereas traditionally they would be using a TL84 light source. Another massive key feature for the supply chain with UltraView is the fact that you've got brand and retailer light sources pre-programmed into the system, and we can add more on as the databases are coming through. So if we just flick left and right on the screen, you can see Marks and Spencer's, Next, Tesco's, H&M, Dunelm, George as part of the Asda group, Primark, all of these, and there's more on that list, who have already specified solely the UltraView light booth. So if you're a supplier to those, you should be purchasing the booth. If they look in the colour manual, the quality manual that is written by the brands, they will see that they have been updated to request the UltraView and VisionView light booths in their supply chain. Most of them have put an end date of December 2025 to have moved the majority of their supply chains over. But what they are now doing is contacting their suppliers and working closely with VeriVide to communicate that out and to be able to get that information to those suppliers so they're making the right colour decisions throughout the supply chain. A lot of these brands have already implemented their head office and sourcing office UltraView light booths. They're wanting to see that quite quickly move forward with all their brands and retailers. For the supply chain, they need to work with our local distributors that are based globally. That information can be found on the website, or they can email sales@verivide.com for some more information on who their local distributor is if they're not aware of that. The local distributors will be able to do the service and calibration for the light booths as well for them, which is key. So traditionally, you could replace out the lamps yourselves in a light booth, but to maintain a global consistency, that would be very variable. Some would replace, some wouldn't. And inconsistencies would appear within the supply chain from that point of view. But with the UltraView, because it is calibrated and back to its original factory setup, across that year of use of the booth and having that recalibration, it's keeping that supply chain within a tight tolerance, which a lot of these brands that we're now continuing to work with and support them through the transition are very keen to see and to be able to improve on. So it gives them a better speed to market, but also the quality of their products is right first time when it lands in the stores, and cuts back on any returns that may be from that process. So we can flick through onto some of the other light sources, L'Oreal, for instance, and there's multiple other ones that are in here. We can even pre-load the ISO 3664 standard. So if you work into the printing, you would need to use D50 lighting, but also to the Part 1 and Part 2. And what I mean by that is the P1, Part 1, is a brighter intensity of light source, as you can see on the booth there. Yeah. And if I hit the D50 P2, you can see it decreases it in the system. Key features that we've added in to the UltraView. So if I can pick any of these light sources and do that with any of the brands. So once the brand switch sets are there, we can work with that straight away. So if I put the daylight light source on, traditionally dye houses that are working with a brand, so in this instance working with Next, would use a suppression filter for looking at any whites within the booth. We've got some videos online on our YouTube channel that explain this in more detail and with clear products in there. But if I hold down the button on the D65, it then goes into our UV toggle feature. So natural daylight or daylight light sources to the CIE standard requires a level of UV content in there. But if you're wanting to see how the garment's performing or to see how much optical brightness has been put into there, you could then use the UV toggle feature to be able to move between that. And it's clearly just a tap of the button. And you can see that the purple writing there is still there, but the ring around it is gone. And what that means is the UV content has been removed from the actual light source itself. And that gives advantage to the brands and retailers, and especially in the lab side of things of the dye houses, to be able to assess the whites. A lot of brands who are working with school wear and products like that, where they've got white t-shirts for the children, and also throughout men's and women's wear, and bed linen as well would be another one in the home section. They would be able to utilise that feature for that. Point of sale lighting doesn't have UV content in there. So the garment has had OBA put into it to make it perform and look better, but in the stores it could look quite grey and dull. So to check that, to see if there's any issues that they might face with the product, they can use the UV toggle feature on all of the light sources within the actual UltraView itself. So as you can see, when I click on the UV toggle feature, there's no ring around the actual light source. The reason being, as I say, there's no UV content in the point of sale lighting, but if I then touch the button there, I'm adding that UV content in. So you could see how that would affect the garment. That could also be said if there's a large window display for the product, and obviously natural daylight coming in from that. Though a lot of glass does have a UV filter on there for a lot of the shops, it will have a level of the UV come through, so the garment could appear differently in the window as it would perhaps in the store itself. So as I say, most of the brands, you know, the real features is you can have multiple light sources, up to 8 on a switch set, and you can have multiple switch sets pre-added into there. But for most brands, they still want to work with their set light sources they've got, but in a modern way and using LED lighting. So they would still use their D65 as a potential primary light source. Some brands do like to use their point of sale as a primary light source, but they will then use 3 light sources to do their colour assessment, colour matching, to make sure there's no metamerism issues in there. So they would use the L30 for Next, and they would then use illuminate A and see if there's any metamerism problems they may face. And obviously you then got the UV on the product itself. The CAC 120 is slightly larger. It's 1200 millimeters wide, but you have the strength of the light source, as you said, within the middle of the booth. So it doesn't matter if you've got the CAC 60 range, either the 4 light source or the 5 light source, or even the old CAC 150s that we used to manufacture. You've still only got the strong light within the middle. So actually the improvement on this, if you're laying out a full garment, so putting a t-shirt out or some trousers within the actual booth itself, you would still get accurate viewing across the whole base. You'd still use your 45-degree table. We recommend the tilting table for looking at more modern fabrics, materials, anything that's of a gloss, perhaps. Plastics, obviously they can vary from being more of a matte finish to having metallic flecks in there, and it's important to be able to adjust the tilting table to view that accurately. So it's all part of the standard on there, but that can be removed out, so you can lay out full garment spreads. if you're looking at a lingerie set and you've got the multiple component sets that you're looking at on a design board, you could actually place that inside the booth still. And the compromise of a slightly smaller one size of unit, actually you've got so much more improvement.